Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida. I have with me from the great Midwest the 30 something ish RDV, and I, of course, am an 80s kid. So tonight we have a very special treat for you, ladies and gentlemen, and anybody that identifies as anything other than ladies and gentlemen. We have another canon classic, 1983's 10 to Midnight, starring Charles Bronson. The diabetes guy is in here, but not really that long. But that was the big arc he was going to have in the 80s. This is a thriller film. It's kind of interesting because it's kind of death wishes, almost sort of whatever, but it's a film that really epitomizes a lot of things about the 80s that we talk about here on the Extreme Movie Show because that's our favorite genre. That's where we like to start from and branch off from, and we cover everything from old movies, classics, horror, sci-fi, you name it, we do it, including some TV too. So RDV, when we talk about 10 to Midnight, we talk about Charles Bronson. We've talked about some of his movies where deliciously taking them in slowly and with no particular pattern to them, unlike Clint Eastwood, where we went through all the Dirty Harrys, and Chuck Norris, where we started early on in this catalog, from Breaker, moving on up. But for 10 to Midnight in a canon film, after having done several canon films, let me be the first one to ask you, did this feel like a canon film to you?
Compared to the Death Wish movies, this felt kind of lackluster. Just in the fence, it just didn't really drag, but it did have a faster pace. But yeah, canon to me has always been the Chuck Norris stuff, like the late '80s stuff. This was kind of like, this felt like a Bronson movie, and just kind of like him phoning it in. Didn't really feel that great, but still a decent movie. I recommend watching it, getting it through. I was looking at the budget. It was like almost, it was like $4,500,000. That was the budget, and it came back with over $7 million, which is kind of crazy for me for being a 1983 movie that it broke over a couple million. But considering that this felt kind of low.
Do it, for the budget, it was did pretty well. Yeah, go ahead.
It felt, but it's just watching it though, it did kind of feel kind of low budget though, not like noticeably compared to what we've known seeing with the other 80s movies, the action movie stuff. This felt like it was just like no different than watching the movie Pig, how they shot it. Yeah, and then you weren't using that. I guess the props. He was using a little switchblade he threw around, the gloves. I mean, I think they probably paid more for the cop cars than the actors, because there wasn't any big
probably
name
more
actors.
Salary than anything.
Yeah, I was thinking, because I was like, it's Charles Bronson's salary. There was no really big names that I recognized. I'm trying to think who his lawyer though looked familiar.
Yeah, there was a lot of people in here that were really popular for the 80s. I just want to point out a few of the names. Andrew Stevens is a guy that you saw him a lot, especially early mid 80s on movies and TV, and you're like, I know this guy, because he's the pretty boy guy that when he actually talks the roles he takes, he doesn't really kind of seem that way, which is kind of interesting. And of course, he's Charles Bronson, detective partner here. Obviously, the movie's really just basically about the fact that you've got a pre-American Psycho, American Psycho type guy that is, well, let's just say this. The movie's about Bronson and the way he deals with a guy that's, I hesitate to say serial killer, but he really is in a way. He's just a murderer. He goes after women, he stalks them, and then he kills them. But he fantasizes about being with them because the guy's impotent. And what's interesting about this film here is Bronson goes along, where we've talked about how in Death Wish he was more like the your classical liberal that you had back in the 60s and 70s. Some may argue that the definitions of conservative liberals changed a little bit over the years, but he was a guy that got a gun and kind of took matters in his own hands. Whereas here, Bronson is more like an angel of death because he's an actual detective, and he even loses his job in here because he goes to no ends to do it. And I thought that was a really neat way in this film of kind of showing you just how he's like, screw this, I'm going to do the right thing, and I don't care what it's like. He's going to bring the hammer down. And I got to mention Gene Davis is the main guy. He's the pretty boy
Yeah.
here, who, of course, is wearing members only. I told you that's an 80s staple, especially in canon films. He's a smart guy. He in the early on scene, he goes to catch a movie. Did you catch what movie it was, by the way?
Yeah, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Robert Redford, which is funny because
Yeah, good catch.
Yeah, I was looking at and I guess who else? The other guy who's in here played his lawyer is Geoffrey Bond Lewis, who worked with Robert Redford and Clint Eastwood, in a few different movies. So that's the guy who the lawyer was. I was trying to remember who he is. I've seen him before. So he's in here. Gene Davis also came back to be in another Bronson film in '88, Messenger of Death, playing another villain. So it's his first, I guess, introduction with Charles Bronson. So he must have liked him enough. Kind of like we kind of brought him back to work together as hero and villain. So, but I gotta tell you though, for this movie, he's a guy, he basically can't make it with a girl, so he gets mad because he's rejected, and then he ends up killing him because he's upset. And Charles Bronson comes on and is like, what's this? You got a little jacking off device in here? Yeah, you've never made with a girl. You're a virgin. And this I love the interrogation scene. And it's like, so you go back and kill them because you're a wuss. That was a fun scene, seeing him doing that. And
I was gonna say that interrogation scene you're talking about is good because you don't usually see stuff. As a kid, this was one of the first Bronson movies I ever saw.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it late at night, and there's tons of nudity and violence.
Yes.
And I'm like, what has he got there? That looks like a some sort of device. And then when he said jacking off, I went, oh my goodness! I knew exactly what it was, but it's just a clunky version of the modern day fleshlight, let's say.
And it's on a power drill.
Bronson, I know, right? It's really weird looking. But Gene Davis plays Warren, and he's a good looking guy. I mean, he's beautiful, really. Not pretty, but he's almost very handsome. He's got really good looking guy. He'd have no problem.
If he wasn't a creep, he'd probably get a lot of girls. Yeah,
interested in it.
Yeah, like I said, if he wasn't a creep.
But that's the thing. You see him working, repairing typewriters, and he can't. He just doesn't know how to interact with women. We don't know why that's the case. Well, we just see a flashback where he came on a girl and she threw coffee on him, and you're like, yeah, this guy just doesn't get it. He's born as a bad seed or something. Maybe he's got single mommy issues or daddy issues. Who knows? We don't care. But that's the thing by the early '80s that really struck out for me is that when we've talked about Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and other things too, slashers really became hot in the '70s and early '80s with the talk of you had the original Red Dragon in the mid '80s with Brian Cox playing it on television before there was Hannibal in 1990, which popularized it. But there was definitely a glamorizing of serial killers, and I think audiences in films by this point with Halloween and the Friday the 13th films and the Canadian ripoff versions, some of which we've covered here on Xtreme Movie Show,
I think
we're ready to be scared. And so I think here, just having a psycho in suburbia like this, I think was, pretty normal for the course. This scared middle-class America, really.
I think the obsession, I guess, realization started with the Ted Bundy cases. He saw how he was a good-looking guy. He used everything. So, yeah. Except that Ted Bundy, I guess, was smoother.
Original Florida man.
Yeah. This guy is a wannabe Ted Bundy. Like Ted Bundy could actually get the girls to come back to his place. This guy has to follow and kill him. It's like, so yeah, he couldn't even do that right.
Well, there's a scene in there early on that I wanted to mention when we're talking about.
I want to say though,
Butch Cassidy Sundance Kid. Go ahead, real quick.
I just want to say it's interesting how he kills them. He uses a knife, but he strips down butt naked. And he puts white gloves on, rubber gloves on.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've never seen that before. And that just shows how crazy he is, because no one will really do that. He's thinking, hey, if I just don't have any clothing on, I can just take a shower. But I'm thinking, someone's going to see you running butt naked down somewhere. Like, how do you, does he stash his clothes somewhere? That's the only thing I can think of, and he comes back in his clothes. But That is just weird.
Yeah, I think when he goes in for the kill act is when he does it, because we see that early on when he's
Yeah.
at the sex van in the woods. You see him
Oh
when he
yeah,
strips
this
down. But they
coworker.
shot two versions of it. One where he's wearing underwear because of the TV edit. Yeah, his
Yes.
coworker,
Yeah.
the one that he that rebuffed him because he's got the creepy vibe. He does.
Yeah. I don't understand. I
Yeah,
guess
the one scene early on
Go ahead.
with the movie theater sums up this guy in a nutshell. He goes into
Oh,
the movie theater, buys a ticket, and in line there's the really decent looking girl with a really nice body, and then her is the okay looking friends. You go for her friend second if that's just the way as a guy you would think. But what he does is he really kind of hits on the girl a little bit in line. He buys his ticket, buys his popcorn, and I got a little sad because when he walked in the theater, I said, I barely remember theaters where they'd actually have
the
um,
curtain.
the curtain that would rise rather than just
Oh,
roll off on
that's
rollers. It
cool.
was a little classier looking. But he buys the popcorn and he's a bit of a jerk to them. And what we find out is he's doing this intentionally because after she kind of rebuffs him a little bit, even though the one's kind of intrigued, as soon as the movie starts, he goes into the men's room and he climbs out a window to go kill his coworker. That's the scene that we just mentioned in the woods, and then he comes back before the movie's over, and then he kind of hits on the girls a little bit too. And the friend is like, "Oh, he's kind of cute. What'd you have in mind as far as going out for drinks?" And then he uses an opportunity to kind of just be mean to the one that rebuffed him, but he's doing it to build his alibi. So this guy's kind of slick and all that too. He's not dumb or whatever. But like I say, the thing that's really started a lot in the '80s wasn't the a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You get stuck in the middle of nowhere and it's redneck country and something weird happens. You don't like it and you're creeped out. No, it's more about you're not safe in what's considered what was supposed to have been safe there and suburbia and all that. And for him, he's not a big guy. We don't see what happens to him. He's just there. And I think that's one of the neat things about the film is that the '80s started capturing this a little bit before it's really started to glamorize it and make it, kind of fun and sexy. Like when Hannibal came out, all those films in the '90s, by then it was kind of over. But something like this, I think Bronson kind of, really going, this guy's affecting me because I'm allowing it to change my judgment. The interrogation, he goes too far, certainly by standards that we've seen at this point. But then when he plants DNA evidence and gets caught doing it because Stevens is his little turd burglar, he really turns on him and he's not loyal at all. That kind of pissed me off with Andrew Stevens. As good as he is, I don't like that. He loses his job. But he doesn't do the woe is me or whatever like that. There's a scene in there where he's just kind of watching TV and you're like, that's kind of funny. But then you're going, okay, Bronson's going to get this guy. And what does he do? He just goes full Bronson mode. It's game on. He
Yeah.
starts stalking. He starts stalking Warren Stacy himself. And this is the part of the movie I really like, the cat and mouse part. What about you? What did you think?
You said all leading up to the very end. Like I said, like Bronson's pretty much, yeah, he's going Death Wish here. He's like, I don't. He said, you guys can let him off and do you want, but this is our guy, and I'm not gonna let him kill again, And he says like, screw you, It's like, and like you said, he's put his career on the line. He's a lieutenant, He's got the younger guy who's the new detective, which also has a thing for his daughter. That was kind of interesting route. I was like, what? Him and his daughter kind of like are gonna hook up or something. And the fact that who was Bronson's last name was Kessler. I kept thinking we have Kessler. That's like a diamond, group around here. We have jewelry, so Kessler diamonds. I kept thinking of that. It just kind of stuck with me. That's a Wisconsin thing here, but I don't think it's popular by you are. But that's the thing that popped in my head for that. But anyway, aside from that. Bronson, yeah, he said he does the whole Bronson thing. He's like, I'm just gonna take care of this guy, and he does towards the end. He's like, and like I said, I don't know if you want to skip to the ending, but I mean, like just the whole when Warren Stacy basically or basically Gene goes in there into where his daughter living, in the home and stuff. And him just going off and like chasing, like he was killing the girls, knifing them together, and like he's going after Bronson's daughter in this, and she's hiding, and then she runs, and just because she's under the bed, and then she keeps going. I love that she runs down the street, and then you see him running after her butt naked with a knife. It's like in the street, and here comes Bronson. It's like, dude, what are you doing? It's like, the first my daughter, and you're naked, and like, and he's like, and I love at the end, he's like, oh, I'm sick. That's right, I'm sick. I killed those girls because you exposed me. He's like, I'm sick. I won't pay for my crimes at all. And I love how Bronson's like, nah, bam, whammy to the forehead. And I was like, that's how it ends. I was like, I was not expecting that, but because this has been so different for them, Death Wish, still in the same
yeah, I agree.
Same genre effect, him Bronson being, messenger of death, kind of like that, and the fact that women are being assaulted, and Bronson getting revenge. So I thought that was interesting that he did that towards the end with all the cops there. So I'm thinking like, well, gee, if this is real life in California, a cop shot a naked guy, what, unarmed guy, and yeah. So now he'd go to jail. But yeah, this is Hollywood, but I know
we had seen by this point with the Dirty Harry films about how there was the element of government corruption and ineptitude and what some may perceive to be as soft on crime laws, and that whole movement going on for a good 10, 20 years at this point. So by the 80s, there was definitely still a lot of crime going on, and it was peaking. It would only start to decline in the 90s. And I think that this film kind of captures, like I say, you've got a good-looking guy. He looks like a normal human being. You wouldn't know he's a bad dude. There's nothing. He's not disfigured. He's not, got anything weird about him other than when he interacts with women only that gives it away. So he could be the every guy walking down the street that you see, or somebody that you catch in your regular routine as a average human being, and yet he can just sneak right up to your windshield or to your window, and boom, you're gone. And I think I got to give the guy credit, Gene Davis, who played him, because it's not an easy role to play. And while it may sound fun and sexy to go, hey, I get to dress in my underwear and run around naked and all that too, you can get typecast for that. And this is a very divisive film at the time, because Bronson fans like myself go, well, it's Bronson, he delivers, and that's what you're watching it for. It does kind of feel like the 80s, but this is when people who started reviewing films really started getting on the merit of films. And I think that the 70s, considered the golden age of writing and films a lot, and TV, started just turning their nose up at stuff. And in a way, it's like we've talked about with wrestling. When you have a finish, it's supposed to end the match, right? But then when you kick out of it, you got to do it a second time. Well, then you got to do it a third, and where does it end? And the 80s was definitely guilty of this in movies, getting to the point where, here, yeah, Bronson shoots him at the end. It's probably not the right thing, but we understand it. No. We get it. And then boom, the movie's over. We don't care. They're not trying to send a message. That's it. It's B level at its best.
You want to remind me?
It's gonzo over the top, like some people might say.
Because him shooting at the end reminded me of Dirty Harry. Him shooting the bad guy and throwing his badge in the water. That's kind of. I was like, because remember they're both
only more sudden.
Aren't they both canon?
Well, I think that you didn't have the same writers on canon films, so I'm not going to say that they deliberately copied, but I know that canon basically said, we want to get these out there, and they tried to streamline, like you say, other than salaries, it was kind of low budget. The trope of the ugly guy, Maron, you're saying in chat here, being the villain, was turned on its head. Yeah, it does subvert expectations. And I think the other thing too about it is when we talk about Bronson's performance, at this point, he's older. He has that stare. He's got that charisma that's just a part of his personality. And a lot of times in interviews, people talk about method acting. They talk about having to, what's my motivation? How is it that I've got here? I need to know everything to get into the right space and all this detailed crap. But a lot of actors like Clint Eastwood and Bronson were the school of like, what are my lines? I'm here. I'm going to say them. If it comes across good, boom. If I'm 78% there, we're done. Let's move on. And it was more of an efficient way. Bronson, I admire him for kind of saying, yeah, I don't think he said, "Oh, I'm going to put a lot in acting in terms of going. I'm going to study all these methods and try to outact somebody." He's going to say, "No, I'm going to be professional because that's how I know how to be, and I'm going to try to match it up with what works best for me." And we've said that, when you watch any movie that has Tom Cruise in it, he's not acting; he's being Tom Cruise. There's a certain charisma with that, and that's what we want. And when you go against that, it doesn't work. Gene Davis is great being the psycho guy in here. Bronson was really great being this like angel of death, the hammer of justice, if you will. And we still get plenty of scenes of pimps and hookers and driving around really scuzzy looking areas of Los Angeles, which is a teenage guy growing up here in Central Florida. Like, I don't want to move to the big city because it looks like crap. But yeah, there's definitely a grimy essence to this film that, going back to what you were mentioning there early about canon films, that I think we do see in a lot of them too. It's campy, B-level fun, but it's done, and it's done well. I think it's a decent film. I know some people really hate on it, but I do agree with you. I think it's very watchable.
I was going through the list. I didn't recognize names, but I looked again. Kelly Preston's in this. She plays Doreen.
Is she?
Yeah, she's listed. She's credited under her maiden name, Kelly Palses or Palsies, whatever. She wasn't married to John Travolta yet at the time, but yeah, she's listed as her character was Doreen. So 1983. So she probably won't recognize her. She's a little younger, but you have to go back and watch. I'm curious to go look back and watch myself. But she was in this. I was like, dang! I was like, oh my gosh, she's in this. Because usually she always played like the news reporters and all that stuff. Whenever I'd see her in any roles, never any big roles. So I'm curious to see who. I can't remember who Doreen was.
With a different last name with the credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going through. I was like, am I just gonna be? I was just curious because a lot of these are TV actors. I'm going through this, except for Geoffrey Lewis, Gene Davis, and Bronson, and then I think who is the other? Wilford Brimley, who ended up becoming a
diabetes guy, Quaker guy.
Yeah, but other than that, a lot of them were like some of the girls were on Battlestar Galactica, And there's another guy who was in Shea Duffin, who was like in the Titanic. He also had a role in Leprechaun. Yeah.
Kelly Preston was in a movie, I remember her in '88, called Spellbinder, I think it was, and it was an occult film, and it's actually a pretty good film, but it was limited release, so it was a bomb. But the reason why I know that is because somebody told me about it and rented it because it was apparently really hard to find. I was like, well, why? She's a name or whatever. But I think what happened is John Travolta at this point had gotten into Scientology, and they became an item. And Scientology started to become very mainstream in the 80s and with certain people in the acting world. L. Ron Hubbard had a presence down here in Central Florida, which is very weird because he actually had an office building right off the main road that cuts through Central Florida here, Orlando, called Highway 50 or Colonial Drive, by two malls, one of which is no longer there. The other one's a dying mall. And it was next to the YK Kim's studio right past downtown Orlando. And the reason why that's relevant is because we covered YK Kim and Miami Connection, the movie that was shot here in Central Florida, like at UCF and other places. So I think L. Ron Hubbard, I can't help but think of all that, but they bought the rights to this movie Spellbinder, so it could never be shown anywhere because apparently with Scientology, they wanted to try to cover up some of their past. But the occult craze being a thing in the 80s, Spellbinder is by no means offensive. I mean, it's hard to say that there's more movies out there that are more graphic than 10 to Midnight with their willingness to show the nudity. They did full frontal, basically, especially with the women, and a guy running around naked, like you say. But it's not, like I said, I don't think it's the gratuitous that we would see in the Friday the 13th, seeing a woman's breast just for, some TNA to make us hoot and holler. This guy was a whack job, and he did a great job coming across that way. And the ending, you said, phenomenal. He's running down the street. I mean, the scene in American Psycho where he's standing on the stairwell naked with the shoes on, or when he's got the chainsaw and he drops it on the girl. I always think of this movie that they had to have gotten it from 10 to Midnight, because here's this guy running around. You want butt shots, you're going to get him in here with them. And he's run down the street. They got the chopper coming. The cops pull up and he gives the whole "you can't do anything to me" speech and all that. I'm sick and they'll let me out. That's how it goes. And then boom, one right to the temple,
Yeah.
done, movie over, roll credits in 5 seconds. No speech, no ha-ha at the end, nothing. That's how you end a movie.
In an interview, Gene Davis, it said that he was given creative control to basically to form his character. And then he said that the director, Lee Thompson, said that he basically wanted, hey, we're not going to make this character sympathetic. And that's why you're getting the ending of it, I think. I assume that's why the ending is. They don't specify what the ending gets shot, but he said he did not want to make the characters too sympathetic, because, well, I don't want to glorify serial killers, because I understand why, because the more attention these people get, the more copycats see, hey, I want to be just like that person, or they're inspired. That's
exactly. Especially when you glamorize it.
Yeah. So that's probably why they gave the ending, and that's also because I think that's. I don't know if that's why the other guy got the ending too, and Dirty Harry, because depending on the director or just canon itself said like, hey, you know what, we're not going to glorify this piece of crap, So yeah. But yeah, it is controversial, and yeah, it kind of reminds American Psycho. Remember the chainsaw scene? Wasn't he also nude in the hallway chasing the stripper?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I won't say what he was doing to one of the ladies he paid for, but the one that escapes. And then he's got the chainsaw because he'd been watching the Chainsaw Massacre in between, porn shows. And like I said, it goes back to this movie. And I think we'll close with our final thoughts right after this. But I want to mention something you said because I think it's pretty critical here. I can talk about what it was like being a kid watching this film, how it was on HBO late nights, and how it fits in. And you can talk about when you first saw it and everything too. But the point you made there about glamorizing, I think, is a big deal because with something like this, a lot of the filmmakers and writers, whether it's the Hollywood liberal slant, will sit there and say that, well, no, we didn't really want to say that police are dumb or stupid or glamorized or whatever, but the 80s had this really hardcore kind of sense of, we're the hammers, we're the ones that want the power. And I think the fans like it from the perspective of, well, the government does get too big and get inefficient and does have to deal with rules and regulations, things that hinder you. And the whole vigilante thing from the 70s to 80s, fans responded to it because in real life, you did not want to have someone sit there and say, oh, sorry, there's nothing we can do. And yeah, it's true. If this guy's a creep at you in the movie theater, you got to figure out a way to handle it because that's life. But like if the way now everybody calls 911 for every little thing, it's ridiculous. So I think fans got what they wanted, which is the right thing happened at the end of the movie, whether he should have done it or not. And it's as simple as that. There's nothing more to it, nothing preachy, no arcs, no themes about it, nothing trying to be meta. It's boom, here's a guy we believe that would do it. Charles Bronson. Thank you, Charles Bronson. We're a fan. Let's go see the next one until he gets a little comical with some people in the hood and one of the later death wishes, which we'll get to.
Hey, I like the pipe shotgun.
Yeah, Moran just mentioned the Tony Curtis effect here, and yeah, that's a long-standing one because Tony Curtis has always come across as a fairly pleasant individual when you see him and stuff. Doesn't mean that's how he is, but one would think of Robert Mitchum. We talked about him recently, and I think it was that Holiday Affair. Robert Mitchum, of course, in the original Cape Fear, most people think was one of his best performances, but this is just average grade Bronson. It's not by no means his best or anything like that, but he's older at this point and it works. I like the movie. I think you should see it if you haven't, especially if you like the 80s. Final thoughts from you, RDV?
Just for the scenery production, the story is kind of I give it a 4 out of well, maybe I'd give it a 3 out of 5. Because it's not really over the top. It's kind of mediocre, but Bronson does, play his Bronson. So you know what you're getting into going in. It's just like you watch a Clint Eastwood movie. You're going here for a Clint Eastwood movie. Good actors in here too. Especially if you're a guy, so the way the girls dressed back then, I gotta say that Tina, whew, that's the one he went after in the theater, remember? Sadly, that was her actress is Katrina Parrish. I looked her up, and she has not. That was her only movie. She didn't do anything else after that. So maybe his acting is really, real, and it's creeped her out. Who knows? But yep. Like I said, this takes place in Los Angeles, so I'm curious to see how accurate it is. We gotta get when we do like Los Angeles movies, we gotta get people in here who actually is from Los Angeles. So we can verify this stuff. Get an expert, But yeah. Definitely check it out. It's a Bronson movie. It's a one and done for me personally. I'm more partial to his, the Death Wish movies. So yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah, and this is
I don't know what else to say. I mean, if you're going off our Siskel and Ebert ratings, Siskel loved it. Ebert gave it 0 stars. Yeah, so.
I will close with this. I grew up on Siskel and Ebert and a bunch of others. It was a a weekly column you would get in newspapers and sit down at the morning table and read them while eating cereal. And for me, I understood when Ebert would write something, how the movie was going to go. So it was a very good template. And the fact that he gives something 4 out of 4 or 0 out of 4, you go, well, then what did Siskel say? Who sometimes they agreed, sometimes they didn't. But they did a very good job of letting you know why they liked or didn't like it, or why it was good or not good. But they're human. They had their preferences of what they liked and didn't like. But to me, it's enjoyable canon film, especially if you like the 80s. You want to dial into something real rather than
it's
this
not
ET crap.
Yeah.
10 to Midnight's
it's not the worst canon film. They're much worse, far worse than this. This is average, and this is still pretty good for a canon film.
Yes. The ninja movies are better, in my opinion, is a series. But like I say, Revenge of the Ninja, best ninja movie of all time, and Enter the Ninja is pretty damn good too. Check those out, guys. Like to thank RDV for showing up tonight and going over this with us. We've had some technical difficulties of late here with some storms in here, so hopefully everything sounded good. We could see you guys in there pretty well. Loved the opportunity to talk another 80s canon classic, and look out for the community tab here soon for what we're going to be coming up with next week on the next time we stream here on the Xtreme Movie Show. For RDV and everybody, have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.